Good day. You are welcome yet again to another episode of Geo Musings with Mansour. And in this particular section, where we are going to be discussing a very important topic, and that topic is Iran versus America. Why Trump must win. Iran versus America. Why Trump must win. Essentially, what is in it for President Trump personally, as Trump, as the President of the United States? What are his interests? Now, there are two or three important factors you need to understand, especially with the political culture of the United States of America, vis-a-vis the sitting president and the electoral behavior of the citizens. Electoral behavior in the sense that what decides, what are the do's and don'ts, what are the holy grails, what are things the American electorate can or cannot tolerate from the sitting presidents, especially with respect to going to war or otherwise. Now, these are what they have. Number one is that any sitting president who is up for re-election or whose party will be up for re-election in the next election cycle. In the case of President Trump, for example, constitutionally is supposed to be not up for election anymore because he will be completing a second term, which is his current term. But we already are hearing chatter that he wants to tinker with the constitution and hopefully secure an unprecedented and ordinarily implausible third term in office. Even if that does not work out, President Trump will definitely want to ensure that he hands over power to yet another Republican president. We are hearing chatter that is considering folks such as Marco Rubio, who is the current US Secretary of State, and J.D. Vance, who is his current vice president. Either way, there are important factors that he must satisfy if he wants to survive, or if he wants to help his party to survive into the next election. The first factor is that Americans never ever forgive a president under which they suffer pain at the pumps. Pain at the pumps. What do we mean by pain at the pumps? When the price of fuel, especially gasoline, skyrockets out of the affordability, out of the affordability of the average American. For example, before this war started, the upper Saturday, the price of gasoline was as low as 2.80, $2.80, per gallon. They use gallon in the US, averagely, in the US ecosystem. As we speak, some parts of the United States of America are buying as much as $5 per gallon. Look at it, from $2.80 to $5 per gallon. It is a big, big problem. If that continues, as far as October or as far as November or close to November when the midterm elections are going to happen, it is very likely that President Trump's party, which is the Republican Party, will lose the midterm election. And the moment they lose the midterm elections, it is very likely they are going to lose the general elections come 2028 or thereabouts to the Democrats. So pain at the pumps is a major factor. President Trump is currently suffering that severely at this time. That is why he has been tinkering, manipulating the market, trying as much as possible to find artificial, even implausible ways to bring the pain at the pumps down, to bring the pump price of gasoline down, and as such to bring the global price of crude oil, Brent, down. Unfortunately, they don't seem to be working very well because the Iranians have locked over 20 million barrels per day capacity off, the global oil market through, as in by blocking the Strait of Hormuz. So first factor, pain at the pumps. Second factor is losing face. And losing face translates to losing war. Yes. You see, America is a war-some country. Apparently, it seems that the culture, of the country is one that seems to agree to constant and consistently, going to war. A lot of America itself, was born from war. The war the fought against the British for independence. After that, they also went to a civil war, within themselves. After that, in the almost 250 years of the existence of America, they have not been at war for just a few years, maybe about 15 years. So the history of the country is heavily pervaded by war, fighting themselves, fighting, against the occupiers and the colonizers, and then fighting several other countries of the world. The numbers, are essentially, astounding. America fought Afghanistan for 20 years. America fought Iraq for essentially 19 years. America fought Vietnam. America fought Paraguay. America fought any and every country. They're almost always at war. So any president that goes to war and loses, they do not forgive and forget. Such presidents include President Carter, who was the one that suffered from the Iranian, what do you call it? Essentially, capture of about over 400 American diplomats in what used to be the American embassy in Tehran, in Iran. So immediately after that incident, because President Carter was seen not to have won that so-called war, he lost his re-election very badly, and his party also lost in the next election. Another recent example is President Biden. President Biden was supposed to have won his election for his second term. However, just before that election, you will remember that it was the president that superintended the loss to the Taliban. After 20 years of war, the American public did not forgive President Biden, and he lost that war, and President Trump won that election instead. So President Trump is also seriously at risk, you know, of losing the midterm elections and eventually the main elections if he is seen to have lost this war to Iran. To Iran. That is a second important factor. Now, there is a third factor that is particularly peculiar to the Republican Party, especially the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, within the Republican Party. And it is the America First factor. When President Trump, got elected into office for this particular term he's in, he got elected on the basis essentially of a social contract. And what is the social contract? He promised Americans, especially his MAGA movement, that he will not take America to war anymore, that he will stop prosecuting wars all over the world, especially in the Middle East, especially in favor of Israel. Instead, he will focus America's resources, attention, and the governmental power on making things better for Americans locally in America, which is very crucial at this time because America has a lot of systemic problems in-house at this time. So the promise was that I will stop going to wars unlike other previous American presidents. I will be the president of peace. In fact, he coined a slogan for that. He called it America First. Unfortunately, the moment he became president, especially in this second term, he essentially joined the Israeli bandwagon. He switched from America First to Israel First, and he started capturing territory after territory. He helped Israel, for example, to do what they did in Gaza. Then he went after Venezuela. Again, the Americans are also a third funny. If you go to war but you win, they will forgive you. In fact, they may, because of that, help you to win the next election. But so essentially, maybe it's really much less about not going to war. Maybe it is actually much more about if you go, you can go, but woe betide you if you do not win. Do you understand? Because he went to Venezuela and there really was almost no brouhaha. The moment he captured President Maduro in a near 2 hour operation, and that was the head, the end of the thing. He did state capture. He decapitated the leadership, so to say. And then the next president, Rodriguez, was essentially doing everything he was asking for. Nobody went for broke in America. Nobody went for President Trump's head in America. But in this instance, where he went after Iran, and he thought it would be like Venezuela, and it was not like a Venezuela. And it seems that America was actually taking the US of A down instead of America taking Iran down. Then he is in bigger trouble. So because of those three factors, number one, like I said, the factor of pain at the pumps. Number two, the factor of going to war and losing. Number three, because the America First contract is signed with MAGA and the people of America is essentially unraveling. President Trump is essentially in trouble. We'll see you at the next episode, like we always do. Please don't forget to like, to follow, to share, to comment. Thank you very much. See you next time.